Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Ivan of Plotted Studios, and today we are going over the monolith once more, the Bento 8 Pro. So, unlike the other 8 videos of this series, I'm not going to do anything crazy. It's more of a review of how I've used it, how I've beat the crap out of it, really, and how it's handled 10 months between being moved around all of my rack units. I relocated. I'm 2,200 miles from where I was, and this was moved alongside of it. All the good, the bad, and the ugly. But first, let's go over once more the specifications of this Bento 8 Pro. So it is country specific for the input. So this is a US model. So it's like, I think the input voltage is 117.5. Output, it is a linear 16 volt power supply. So it is super smooth. It's super good. I've not once had an issue with the electronics. It's as good as it could be. So it's a plus or minus 16 volt, 2 amps. And each channel, I believe, has a quarter or 250 milliamps. We'll double check that right now. And obviously, it's phantom power in each channel as well. So you could actually be running phantom power on all 8 channels if you had all 8 microphone preamps that required phantom power. And 48 volt DC, which is phantom power, is at 0.25 amps. Power consumption is at 100 watts. And it is a hefty rack. It weighs about, the gross weight says 16.5 pounds and the net weight's about 13. That sounds about right. It's a beefy power supply. I'm going to tilt it like this just because I have camera lights, but this is the really cool part. Let's double check. I have notes here. And I'm also going to flip over to the main page. So yes, it is 500 milliamps per slot for the amperage. And phantom power, like I said, is 0.25 amps. It is 8 input, 8 output mono. So let me actually show you the backside. They are XLR male and XLR female for the input and output. Now, this is really helpful because if you are running the XLRs and you need phantom power, best way to go about it is through an XLR for a microphone. You don't want to do TRS unless you're doing very hot swap patch work, and I do not recommend that unless you know exactly what you're doing. I always tend to mess everything up, so I don't. But that being said, let's go over a couple more features of this once more. Also on the back panel, you'll see switches on the bottom here and switches on the top. The bottom is for linking. If you want to link one channel to another, it's basically an audio pass-through. Very nice switching. And it's an audio link. Then on the top switch right here, let me see if I can find it. Yep. That's a compressor link. I'll go a little bit over that. And following that on this side, on top of having the fuse right underneath the input power supply or the input on and off, we also have down here ground. You could have a ground lift on it. I run a UPS for all of my recording gear. It's very unnecessary. If you have clean power, you don't really need to do it. I always run a power conditioner. Power conditioner is connected to my UPS, and the UPS is connected to the outlet. That way I can make sure it's as clean as possible and as consistent as possible. If you've recorded in certain areas, like where we used to live, there were occasional power inconsistencies with brownouts. People in the San Diego, Southern California region, you would know that because the minute it gets hot, brownouts and rolling power outages So I also almost blew up my friend's API 3124 due to a power outage. So you don't want to ruin $6,000 with the gear because the lights turn off. So everything's on a UPS. This is no different. I don't use the original IEC cable or the power cord just because I had a couple of 12 gauge power cords lying around. It's more me than the one that was given to me, and the one that comes standard for a Bento 8 Pro. Also, it does come with feet. So if you go, let me see if I could show you kind of quickly. There's holes on either side here. It's about an inch in, like an inch from the corners. They give you rubber feet as well, and I have used those, but I have since then racked this Bento 8 for a lot of my production work. So I removed them and I have them put away. They're in a box over here. I don't need it just because I have it in a rack, but when I began doing these product videos and demoing it, I was messing around quite a bit with them. So I always had the feet on it just so that way it didn't scratch the floor. But it's inevitable with rag gear. It's going to get scratched. It's going to get dented. It's going to get beat up. And that is why I'm making this follow-up video 10 months after, almost 11 months actually, now that I'm looking at the time. 11 months after I received it. So, the good about this Bento 8 Pro, price. Fred is, in my opinion, he is very, very good at making the best audio gear on the market at very affordable prices. Now, that's to say that he also has made $4,000 pieces of gear as well as $100 pieces of gear. But there's one thing that is consistent in his product line, and it's all top quality. You will see that, and this is a great example. On the left-hand side, this Gold Series, you have a $1,000 compressor. It's a tube compressor. It's $1,000. Over here, or not over here, but if you go right here, you have $200 compressors. They are all very good. And in most of the cases, I would go for the Artistic Series just because it's highly versatile. If you've dealt with levelers or you've used the 1176s a lot, you know the sound when you're using it, you know how to get there, and it's very quick. With the Gold 602, I believe it's, yeah, I want to make sure I get my numbers right. With the 602, I spend a lot of time finessing it. That's not a problem whatsoever. I don't think that's ever been a problem. It's just, I get kind of nerdy with stuff, and it's easy for me to just go into tinker mode for 10 minutes while the guy is waiting. So if I have the time, it's great. If I don't have the time, I'll generally have a preset like a 4-to-1 mid attack, mid release, high pass, because I don't want it to, or I'll sidechain it so that way the low end doesn't pump the compressor. And that's more like my general go-to. If, on a side note, if you're using compressors and you don't know how to set them, generally going up the middle is good enough. 4-to-1 has always been great. I mean, just about everyone uses 4-to-1. Kind of average attack, kind of average release. If you're a little worried about how you're printing into your DAW because you're using hardware, then have a quicker release and a slower attack. That will have less an effect of compression. And if that's only if you're being reserved. I don't really go that way. I am very much a print and go kind of person. So that being said, let's go into how the Bento 8 Pro is working. Back panel, like I showed you, all XLR on the input and output. And the one thing I did consistently use in all of my productions, except when I was trying to be very specific for these videos, was that audio link on the very bottom. Let me show you once more. It's this here. It says norm and then link. Or yeah, norm and link. What that would do is I generally will go microphone preamp, compressor, and that's really how I go into most of my signal chains. EQ, I will do as much as I can if I have an EQ on board. My console has an EQ on board, so it'll go preamp, EQ, and I'll use an insert for one of my compressors. For this case with the Bento series, since I don't have an EQ lined up for this, I just went straight microphone, preamp, and then compressor. To do that, you don't have to do any crazy routing. You just slide this switch, and now you have the preamp going into the compressor. That's honestly as simple as possible. And I will say this has saved me a couple times because I have made mistakes where I've either overcompressed, undercompressed, or distorted the compressor output. I always had all 8 inputs open and available. However, the outputs were always going and being recorded. I always had it connected to my converters. So what I would do, and what the Bento 8 allows you to do, is if you do channel 1, your mic preamp, let's give you this example, right? I have an F609 as my microphone preamp on the far left, tube preamp, and I have the F602. Actually, sorry. Yeah. Got it right. F609 is my microphone preamp. F602 is my compressor, my tube compressor. These are both tube. And you have seen them if you've gone this far in the video series. What I would do is I would put for instance, this V1 Lolly, right? Large diaphragm condenser, requires phantom power P48. Connect that directly to input 1. Now, instead of grabbing the XLR output and then going to the XLR output of channel 1 and going to the XLR input of channel 2, I flipped the switch. Now they're linked. What that means is all the audio that's passing in channel 1 output is going into the top of channel 2 input. Also, you could grab that direct feed from the XLR output and then record it. So I always had a dry and a wet signal being recorded. That works great for 2 scenarios. One, it always saved my butt. In case I did overcompress, like I said, distort, or just not do it right, not set it up right. And secondly, the other reason why I did that is parallel compression. Yes, these compressors all have parallel compression, but if I have that pure dry sound and have that pure wet sound and I want to mix lightly in the box with that dry sound, I could have the heavily compressed audio, which is analog from Fredenstein, going in and then using that as my parallel compression. It works phenomenally. And so I'm not having to waste the output going into the input. They are their own. And I could always take a dry track. I always did that. It's every single time I've recorded with this Bento, I've always taken the dry just because I needed it. I always had something I messed up and things happen. So I'd rather be safe, have that dry track. And if I messed up the compressor track, that's fine. Or in some cases, I ran the microphone input too hot, so the dry track was crap. But it fed beautifully into this F602 because it is the nicest tube compressor I have ever used, and I think I will ever use. And that, like I said, I have 12 rack spaces worth of compressors. But this one compressor, it will take that distorted tube sound and saturate it, and it sounds natural. It's not artificial because it is a tube discrete circuit. Enough of that though. If I wanted to move forward, if we go further into this, all of these compressors, so this F602, and we also have this F600A, which is a solid state compressor, or the artistic leveler, or the artistic comp plus. These all have a link. Fredenstein has a very beautiful way of doing this. If you have one of these compressors and you're using a Bento rack, on the back of this panel, what it'll do is this comp bus on the top, if you flip it, now what you're doing is you're actually running this in stereo. So if you have two of the same compressor, two of the same units that are linkable, it will then pass it and you now have stereo compression that works. It's not like setting two units up separately and you have that phase misalignment. These compressors are identical with the gain structure. That's how this Bento 8 Pro runs. It's how Fredenstein designs his gear. And it's an added benefit if you buy into that series. Now, I haven't been able to test this feature just because I only have mono units, which is not going to be the case in the next few months or a year. I do plan on doubling up and vastly improving my rig using Fredenstein products. I just like them. There's really nothing else about it. But this Bento box allows you to do that. Also, if you are running stereo or you're running 5.1 or 7.1 recording for like Atmos stuff, and you do want to come out of the box and do it, if you do link it, all the channels can link. So if you're doing like a 7.1 mix, you could set the first track on channel 1 and link the other remaining tracks to that. And it could do that without a problem. So keep that in mind if you end up doing that kind of setup. This can definitely handle it. Also, another cool feature that I've tried and I've done is this was more of a testing purpose, but just because I wanted to try it out. So when this was sent, this is the Mic Pre Plus, the Artistic EQ, Leveler, Comp Plus. They are 4 separate tracks, right? However, with the Bento 8 Pro, like I said, on the bottom, they have the calm and the normal. I actually passed from the microphone Pre Plus to the Artistic EQ with that norm link. And then from the norm link, I enabled it. So now it's linking the Artistic EQ to the Artistic Leveler. Then from the Artistic Leveler, I am passing to the Artistic Comp Plus. So I ran all 4 of these tracks and it passed the audio in series. So what was there previous to that was affecting the next channel or the next gain stage. And that worked really well. I was very surprised by it. It's not really explicitly mentioned in the manual that you could do that, but you can. And if you love like channel strip rack units, I know I do. I love channel strip stuff. It makes my life easier. Just having a 1U that you do everything and you're good. This emulates that. And you could, I don't know why you would, but if you wanted to get rid of the Fredenstein stuff and put your own favorite EQ or your own favorite compressor, you certainly can. But running the Mic Pre Plus with like a very little on the color, then going to the Artistic EQ, dialing that color switch that we have, then you could feed it into the Artistic Leveler. So let me backtrack a little bit. Let's assume it's a vocal mic, right? A very common trick is to do an 1176 into like a 165, right? You have a very fast compressor knocking the peaks down, and you have the leveler, the VCA kind of just smoothing it out, right? You could do that with this, which is what I did. I had a microphone going in, vocal mic. I was EQing it, contouring it to how I thought it should sound. Had the leveler just kind of gluing everything, making it smooth, making it warm, making it sound perfect like an opto compressor should. And going into the Comp Plus at 20-1 and just drilling those peaks. What you get is the most musical sound you could possibly get. And that is because the way the Bento 8 Pro runs. Now, let's move forward into the other section here, which is on my left. These 2 VUs are 2 mono channels for your listening. If you see these rotary controls right here, these go 1 to 8, and that's because it's channel 1 to channel 8. And this is your volume for your headphones, which is right there. So if you want, you feasibly could listen to 2 independent channels in this Bento 8 Pro and be able to get the proper listening source. That to me is great, because if you want to do like very interesting A/B testing, or if you want to hear what a certain thing is doing, especially if you don't have a Bento 8, or if you don't have like the Gold Series is right here on my right. They all have VUs, but if you could tell, the Artistic Series does not. It really uses just the LEDs. If you patch in the channels, you could check your gain structure by looking at the VUs for the headphone output. And I have pretty nice headphones. I have a HD 700 from Sennheiser, and I have the Beyerdynamic DT770 250 ohms. And I not once had a problem using this headphone jack. It's capable of handling that kind of ohm rating, because it is 250 ohms and 150 ohms. This Bento 8 Pro had no issues getting the proper gain structure and getting the sound without being like crap, which is what a lot of other units I've seen have. They don't really pay attention to that kind of circuit, but Bento 8 Pro does it very well. I can't get a good visual on this, but there's ventilation ports on the top here. And if you could kind of see how it changes a little bit on my left, that is because Fredenstein designed it to have an isolated, kind of like a Faraday cage for the transformer for the power supply. Also, it's 16 mil thick for the chassis. This makes it extremely tolerant to and resistant to RF frequencies, which generally do come out of transformers. If you hear high-pitched whining noise, generally it's the transformer. I did not have an issue with this, though, which is great. It was able to handle anything I did. I've done burn-in tests with this, even though I probably shouldn't have. I left it on for a month at a time just to see what would happen, and nothing happened. It was hotter in the room I was working in than the actual Bento 8 Pro was, which was very nice to see and very reassuring that this could be able to handle torture. And like I said, I've moved this thing around so many times, and it has been absolutely stellar. I've not had one issue with this Bento 8 Pro. And honestly, for the price, which I believe is like $439 in the US, you can't really go wrong with it. It has 8 channels, 8 mono inputs. You have the compression link. You have the norm link for the input pass-through, or the output pass-through to the next channel adjacent to it. These are features that you just don't see, and it just works so smoothly, and I like how it runs. And another benefit, I'm getting tired doing this, but let's see. Right here. Like the leveler, I believe it is, and the Comp Plus. The leveler, sorry. If you're running like the Bento 6D or 10D on the back of the unit, I know I'm kind of going outside of the topic again, but there's 2 XLR inputs, 2 XLR outputs for auxiliary channels. If you have that Artistic Series in there, you could actually use the auxiliary to do a sidechain insert. And like I said, these are things that Fredenstein has thought out when they designed these units, so that we're way hyper compatible with their own product line on top of other product lines for other companies. And so you're basically allotted multiple varieties of, and multiple flavors and multiple ways of doing things, and your workflow will not be hindered by the rack, which you should have never been hindered by in the first place. Which leads me to my last point, is the power wattage and the consumption per channel. This is the biggest thing you have to worry about. It's kind of like guitar pedals, where if you buy a power brick, you have to make sure that the amperage is right, or else you're just going to have a power suck and it won't work. These Bento 8 Pros are made to handle any single rack 500 series piece you could find on the market. The compressor and the tube compressor and microphone, the F609 and the F602, they take a lot of power. And I mean, they are very power hungry because they have tubes in it. And the constant draw means that you need to have very good 500 series racks in order to power them. And whether you're choosing the Bento 2, the Bento 8, Bento 8 Pro, the Bento 6, 10, 6S, 6, 10S, my apologies, there's so many of them. They are all capable of handling high power consumption like the F609 and F602. But to recap, the Bento 8 Pro is 16 watts or 16 volts to linear power supply. It has been the most rugged piece of gear that I've ever owned, and I've legitimately tried to abuse it just so I could see how it could handle. I've not had one issue with connectivity. I've not had one issue with the power supply failures. It has been able to handle all of the Fredenstein products I've done in this video series, as well as other 500 series units. It has been the nicest introduction to a 500 series rack that I've been delaying for myself and for my studio for way too long. And now being introduced with this kind of product, I don't know if I could go to a different one, simply because the flexible routing is here where it's not present in other ones. It's allowing me to continue my workflow and enhance my workflow instead of hinder it. And like I said, even being able to split channels and get the DIs and get the dry sound instead of the wet, or being able to pull both, or passing audio through 4 channels in series. These are things that are not common in other 500 series modules. It is, however, in this Bento 8 Pro, and I'm sold on it, man. I love this stuff, and even though this video series is terminated after this video, you will see a lot more of me popping up with smaller segments and just kind of playing with how these units work and interact, because there isn't enough content that pertains to this kind of stuff, and the routing matrix is very beautiful on this Bento 8 Pro. So like I said, you could get these at Sweetwater, and you get Bento 8 Pro. You can buy them at Sweetwater. If we don't have them in stock, we could order them directly through Fredenstein with our relationship. Call 1-800-222-4700, extension 1326. That is Bob Furlong, my personal SE. He will hook you up. These are beautiful units. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm more than happy to answer anything. And if I don't, I will call the man himself and I will get the answer for you. But otherwise, like I said, I've used this for 11 months almost, and I've gone through the paces with this unit, and I cannot find anything wrong with it. I am genuinely surprised that it's still working and still functioning after a year of long use, power inconsistencies, and multiple swapping of the units, being able to route things and being able to control everything as I needed it to. I haven't been able to enjoy it as much as I wanted to because of COVID, but I sure as heck made every possible use I could out of it. And I recorded 3 bands with it. I have done a lot of scratch tracks. I've done a lot of pre-pro using this stuff, and I'm primarily an analog guy, and being able to use this, it just enhanced my workflow and made it better, like I've said a million times already. But with that being said, once again, I have an Applauded Studios, and if you have any questions, please let me know. If you live in the United States, you can pick this up at Sweetwater. Call 1-800-222-4700, extension 1326. I know I already said that, but I just want to reiterate that. If you live over the pond, we have retailers for Fredenstein as well. Just contact your retailer if they're not vendors, and we will figure out a way to get these units to you. If you have any other questions, like I said, please let me know. Comment below, email me, send me a message on Instagram, Facebook, whatever have you, and I will answer any of your questions. Also, if you have any questions that I don't know the answer to, I will call Fred myself and make sure I get that answer to you. But like I said, this is the summary of the Bento 8 Pro in all of its glory. And if there's one thing you want for a 500 series rack, it's going to be this unit. Take care. Thank you so much for watching.